A while back, we visited Eastmarch of Skyrim and concluded that at the start of a fresh game, Skyrim has a homelessness population of about 14.7%. Which sounds pretty bad because it is. The homelessness rate per hold ranged drastically, from the Pale having whopping 27.3% of its people experiencing homelessness, while Falkreath had 0% of its people experiencing homelessness. But a lot happens in Skyrim while the Dragonborn is running amok doing the things that the Dragonborn is gonna do. And surely these actions have consequences that affect the people of Skyrim. So, my question is, did the Dragonborn inadvertently affect the homelessness population of Skyrim? Because a lot has happened once you've reached the end game of Skyrim. Like you defeated Alduin, ended a civil war, became the leader of every faction in the game, became Thane of every hold in the game, saved the world from a vampire cult, and a bunch of other stuff specific to certain holds. Surely these things made a difference, and there's only one way to figure that out. Do the exact same thing we did the first time, but this time, after we've done all the important stuff that I just mentioned. Before we do this, it's important to remember some of the things we established from last time, and all of it stems from our official definition of homelessness. When an individual or family lacks a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, such as those living in emergency shelters, transitional housing, or places not meant for habitation. Fixed, meaning a permanent residence. Taverns are not a fixed residence, unless you are also employed by said tavern. That's just how it works in this world. So if you are a mercenary hanging out in a tavern, waiting for someone to come along and hire you, you are homelessness and unemployed. But we don't care about unemployment here. Regular and adequate, meaning a person may have a regular sleeping area, but may not be adequate. Are they exposed to the elements? Do they have some access to food and water? Is the Wi-Fi public or private access? These are the things that we will be looking for. There will also be a couple groups of people who we will add to the total population of Skyrim, but we will not list them as citizens of any specific hold. Along those similar lines, there are also groups of people that we will ignore entirely, like bandits because they are nameless NPCs whose sole purpose is to be killed. And since we sided with the Empire, because I don't like racists, all remnant Stormcloak camps will also be ignored since they are hostile upon arrival, similar to bandits. The other groups we will ignore is because they have no affiliation with Skyrim and want nothing to do with our silly little survey, like orcs in their stronghold, the Forsworn, and whoever else I can think of when I think of them. So, let's get started. The Reach. A lot has happened in the Reach since we were here last. Like we participated in the Forsworn conspiracy that resulted in a lot of people dying, along with everyone in the jail either also dying or they became feral. I guess that's the best word for it.
Ah, my friend from Sidna Mine. Hello.
So everyone that was in that jail is now void as far as our survey is concerned. We also slaughtered a cannibalistic cult. We sacrificed some guy to Moloch Baal against our will, which I wasn't too crazy about because on a list of gods I would sacrifice a person to, Moloch Baal is like on the bottom. Oh, and the cook also died somehow. So yeah, Markarth is pretty fucked when you think about it. Other than that, things are pretty much the same. There's still one homeless mercenary and a fishing enthusiast living in a Silverblood inn. The Warrens are still just crappy apartments, mostly filled with housed people. Last time when we were talking about the Warrens, I referred to them as crappy apartments. And the people living there aren't homeless. And I'm going to stand by that because their names are on the door, which suggests ownership and permanent residence. And although they may not seem adequate by our standards, in terms of Skyrim's adequacy, I say they are, but barely. In terms of the rest of the Reach, we got rid of those Silverblood mercenaries that were occupying that mine in Karthwasten, and that girl that lived behind the barracks turned out to be a spy, along with that guy in Iverstead. And after you complete that quest that's given by the guy in Shorestone that wants to fight everyone on the streets, it looks like they all move on with their lives, so good for them. I hope they're home safe. In the Reach, you'll also find a couple mines and farms that have pretty much been untouched, and we met a nice family that operates the old Hraldon Inn. There's also one carriage driver that's stationed outside the city. All the carriage drivers and ferrymen that we come across will count towards the total population of Skyrim, but they will be counted as homeless, as is the way of the road.
Way of the road, buddy.
So before the Dragonborn, the Reach had a homelessness rate of 19.25%. After the Dragonborn, the Reach has a homelessness rate of 2.9%. That's only 3 people out of its 104 people experiencing homelessness. Yeah, the living conditions may be questionable, but we're still looking at a pretty good start. So how do I explain this? A couple ways. First of all, a lot of people died. Like a lot. 14 to be exact. I think the rest comes from guards that I missed the first time. I mean, it's hard to count things that are constantly moving. But all in all, that's a pretty good improvement, even if it was brought on by violence, which is not the solution to homelessness. Haafingar. We might be going from the most changed hold to the least changed hold. Fortunately, since we sided with the Empire, Haafingar didn't feel the effects of the war too much. A few other people did die for other reasons though, like Captain Morrow had it out for me. 2 of those Argonians turned out to be pricks. So now Gollum Eye sleeps under the stars by himself. The captain of the Red Wave also died mysteriously. But if I recall correctly, we didn't count the Red Wave crew as Haafingar citizens because the boat is their housing, and all current evidence suggests the boats move. So our conclusion is that these people are Skyrim citizens, just not Haafingar citizens. Haafingar is also home to 1 farm and 1 mill, along with a lone Khajiit that maintains the lighthouse, that I think I forgot about last time. Belran still lives in the Winking Skeever, and No Stir still sleeps behind this house. Both people we will count as homeless. And the madman that walked around begging for help went on vacation and just never came back. You will also find 1 carriage driver and 1 ferryman stationed here. Oh, and remember this guy from Dragonbridge? Turns out he's a bandit pretending to be a guard, and you end up killing him. Too bad, so sad. Let's look around to make sure we didn't forget anything. Ah, crap, I forgot about the homeless kids.
You probably want someone else. I'm just the stable boy.
Now, the right thing to do would be to adopt these kids and provide them with fixed and more than adequate living space.
Really? Do you have a place I can live?
After all, I do own 9 houses and a farm. I have the power to end childhood homelessness in this country. So the question is, do I let these kids live in one of my many houses that I never even really use? Nah, I can't really be bothered, can I? Good luck, Squirt. The total population of Haafingar before the Dragonborn was 99 total people, with 5 of them being homeless. But upon further inspection, that was just a straight up miscount, because after the Dragonborn, we're looking at 116 people and 4 of them being homeless. That's an improvement rate from 5.05% to 3.4%. There's no way the 17 people were added to the population. I just missed a lot of guards and ignored the East Empire Company warehouse. I still didn't count the Thalmor Embassy because, again, I still won't touch them with a 39.5-foot pole. And I'm ignoring the Kataria because the Emperor and the people on that boat live in Cyrodiil. Plus, they may or may not all be dead. I'm not entirely sure. Hjallmarch. Nothing much ever really happens in Hjallmarch. I did destroy a vampire's plot to take over Morthal, which resulted in the deaths of some people with homes, and other than the Moorside Inn's bard meeting an untimely death, that's about it. But I think now is a good time to bring up being a Thane. Because when you become Thane of a hold, you are given a housecarl. Now unless you build a house in that hold, then that housecarl is destined to live their life in the Jarl's longhouse. I figured it's only right to have your housecarl be the steward of your house, so that they have an actual house to live in. Along with your custom house, you are given the option to have your own personal bard and carriage driver. I'm not a fan of this because it seems narcissistic to have your own personal bard, and a carriage driver seems redundant when you could ride a dragon anyways. But I did it anyway to maximize data. The bard and housecarl turned steward have beds in the house, so it's fair to say that they live here. But the carriage driver stays in his carriage no matter the time of day, in a desperate attempt to prove that he's more reliable than a dragon. So I'm going to say that he lives on that carriage. And we've already concluded that the way of the road is a way of homelessness. Long story short, each house you build equals 2 house people and 1 homeless person. So use your power wisely. Oh, I forgot to check Stonehills. Damn it, they're all still sleeping outside. I guess Sorley didn't get the message from last time. Give your workers a house! Fun fact about Tiba, if you side with the Stormcloaks, Sorley becomes Jarl of Morthal, and Tiba becomes her housecarl, making him the highest ranking Argonian in all of Skyrim. God damn, he's yoked! Buffest Argonian in the world right here. So, even though we killed some people in Morthal, the total population still increased thanks to us building a house. Before, there were 34 total people, with 7 of them being homeless. Now there's 35 people with 6 homeless. That's better, but not really. The fisherman that was right here died. Benor is still squatting in the guards' barracks. Stone Hills is still where the majority of the homeless people live in this hold, because Sorley is cheaper than Mr. Krabs. Speaking of Mr. Krabs, this guy is still living here too. Falkreath. Believe it or not, a lot of things actually happened in Falkreath. I did a job for a dog, I made some new friends, those new friends died, but then I made even more new friends, but they live in the Pale, so we'll talk about them later. Neither of those things affect the homelessness population, but ironically what did was saving our friend Valder from some bears. Because after he buries his friends, he spends the rest of his days in the dead man's drink, so he's friendless and homeless. We also saved Sinding from a life in the Falkreath dungeon so he could live his life as a werewolf. A homeless werewolf. And we killed a vampire moonlighting as a mill worker. Anise and Angie are still chilling in their cabins. I also became Thane and gave another bard and housecarl a place to live. So even though the Dragonborn did good deeds for the people of Falkreath, they still resulted in a higher homelessness population. Weird. Except for the Jarl's housecarl. He drank himself to death. So Falkreath Hold goes from having 0% homelessness rate to an 8.3 homeless rate, which marks the first hold whose homeless population has increased by the Dragonborn's influence. It's only 3 people, but it's ironic that it came from acts of good. Mostly good. I guess there's some gray area with the werewolf to slaughter a little girl thing. What are you gonna do? Whiterun. Whiterun did see some action since there was a Civil War battle there, but oddly enough it wasn't that bad. There were some deaths that affected the numbers, like while becoming Harbinger for the companions, you lose Karlak and Skewer. Spoiler alert. I turned Nazim into a sweet roll, then found out that Sinmir is another guy squatting in the guards barracks. So we lost one, they gained one. A couple other small changes are Commander Caius just flat out despawns after the Thieves Guild fiasco, and Servio Pelagia dies off-screen during the Battle of Whiterun. I guess in his own house. Anoraith fell down some stairs. And Heimskr moved into the prison. I don't remember if I turned in that Redguard woman or not. Let's just see if there's anyone sleeping back here. Oh god. Rorikstead did not change, and you can't make me go back there to check. And you know why. Just trust me that Halvar is still there. Embry is still sleeping on the floor of the Sleeping Giant Inn, and Brennun is still making the best of his situation. Not to mention the little girl that still sleeps behind the bannered mare, that I ignore when she asks me if I could be her dad. Speaking of which, now is a good time to bring up the Greybeards again. Because even though High Hrothgar is technically in Whiterun Hold, I'm not going to count them as Whiterun citizens. Because they can't really be bothered by Jarl Bolgraf when their actual boss is a freaking dragon. So Whiterun Hold still has the highest population at 144 total people and still has 7 homeless people. It went from a 5.16 to a 4.8%. But that number is really only different because I was more diligent with my counting of the guards. Like really diligent. The Pale. Oh boy, a lot happened here. And I hope it's for the better, because the Pale had the worst numbers last time. First of all, I mentioned that my new friends moved here after I became listener of the Dark Brotherhood. However, I'm not going to count them as citizens of the Pale, because that just doesn't make sense to me. Them being there is a secret. So everybody in the sanctuary will count towards Skyrim's total population. Okay. I helped that Irander guy. Turns out he was on a redemption arc to save Dawnstar from Vermina, who's like the Daedric god of Inception. I decided to take him with me because he seems like a pretty cool dude. And I don't know, I guess I believe in second chances. And in case you're wondering, if you don't take him along with you, he just stays in Nightcaller Temple, which I would count as a home, since most priests permanently live in their houses of worship. There's still a group of sailors sleeping outside on the Sea Squall, but unlike the Red Wave crew, I'm going to count these people as homeless because this boat is just not adequate for habitation. Like, it's not even close. And also, these people who we thought lived in the Wind Peak Inn turned out to be part of a Moloch Ball cult. So I did what anyone in their right mind should do with people like this. Fucking nuke them. Same thing with that Mythic Dawn guy that tried to open a museum. These three still live homelessly in this mine. The Hall of the Vigilant got wiped out, so they don't matter anymore. One of the mine bosses mysteriously died. I made a trip out to Egna's mill because a mummy told me to kill a guy out there. Don't worry, everyone else at that mill is still alive and housed. But on my way there, I stopped at the Nightgate Inn to see if Fultheim is still an angry drunk.
You see any other inns around here? Where else would I go to drink?
He is. Cooked an orc. And found Santa Claus. I guess Mrs. Claus kicked him out because he's homeless now. See, that was a lot. The craziest thing about all that is that there isn't even a person named Egna at Egna's mill. By the way, that couple of Lurius' farm are still fine. I did not let Cicero get to them. Also, Dawnstar is missing a good amount of people because they were Stormcloaks supporters and had been exiled to Windhelm, but we'll talk about that when we get to Windhelm. Before the Dragonborn, the Pale had the worst homelessness population at 27.3%, but thanks to the Dragonborn it was brought down to 18.7%. Still not great, but baby steps. Even though that improvement came at the cost of murking people that didn't have a home. I can't reiterate enough that violence is not the answer to homelessness. Winterhold Hold. In the journey of becoming Archmage of the College of Winterhold, which is a job I didn't even want, the college lost 2 teachers and 1 fascist, but we don't really miss him, and 1 additional teacher just disappeared. That's pretty much all that happened here. Winterhold was affected the same way that Dawnstar was, in the sense that its Jarl and son had to flee to Windhelm, which is a shame. Who wouldn't want to live in Winterhold? Ramnir disappears from the game after you give him a ledger from his long-lost love. Nelacar is still right where he belongs, and the miners in Whistling Mines still haven't struck it rich, so he still can't afford housing. There's also 2 Dark Elves that appear to live at the Shrine of Azura.
Leave this shrine, blasphemer, before I kill you for defiling Azura's artifact.
Damn, I don't even know what I did. Although I usually count places of worship as residents, this just doesn't look adequate, so I'm gonna call them homeless. Don't worry, the Pale, you are no longer at the bottom. Winterhold now holds that crown. It used to have a homelessness population of 16.2%, but now it's a whopping 22.6%. That's 7 out of its 31 people being homeless. Winterhold always looked the part of being the worst. Now we can officially play the part. The Rift. Let's see, where do I start with the Rift? I became the Guildmaster of the Thieves Guild, and in that process I killed Mercer, but we gained Carlia, even though Carlia lives in Nightingale Hall. Also, all of these merchants moved in, so I guess the question is, do these little alcoves count as adequate permanent living spaces? I'm inclined to say yes. Most merchants live in their shops, and the Thieves Guild does provide adequate sleeping spaces, even though there aren't always enough beds. So maybe they sleep in shifts or something. Above ground, this guy Shader, who lives on this bench on the bridge, moved from here to there. So, 1 step at a time. That's all you could really do. Turns out he owes Sapphire some money, and after settling that debt for him, he moves to the stables. So that debt was really holding him back. Lewis gets you to steal a horse, and I haven't seen him since, so who knows, maybe Maven got to him. Speaking of Maven, ever since she became the Jarl, she finally gave her boy Maul a good place to live instead of just standing out by the docks. So maybe Maven's heart isn't black like a raven.
And when the time is right, I'll settle accounts with Louis.
Nah, it is. Other than that, things are pretty much the same. The brothel did gain a new tenant, a crab, So good on Helga for branching out and helping all those in need. Mercuria was still living in the Bee and Barb. Beggar's Row is still filled with homeless people, even though one of them likes it there. The nice old woman who ran the orphanage full of kids that I'm still not going to adopt passed away peacefully in her sleep, so that's a shame. Outside of Riften, there are some changes too. We already covered the fighting guy in Shorestone, and this other guy in Ivarstead, but I can't find Barknarf for the life of me. But the last thing about the Rift I want to talk about is Narfi. In the last video, I immediately called him homeless based on his appearance and mannerisms. But that's not fair to him, because he does have a fixed residence, it's just ruined from years of neglect. Neglect that happened because Narfi has gone crazy, waiting for his sister to return.
Makes Narfi very, very sad. Narfi needs Rada to say goodbye.
It just goes to show that sometimes you shouldn't ask why the drinking, instead ask why the pain. But none of this matters because I murdered him. What are you gonna do? So between all the farms and all the bullshit that happens in the Rift went from a 20.3% to a 16.8% homeless rate. But again, this was mainly brought on through violence and Civil War relocation. Helga still seems to be the only one trying to do anything about Skyrim's homeless problem. Even though Fort Dawnguard is in the Rift, I'm counting them as their own separate entity. But something I learned today is that the Dawnguard takes their own refugees. They're homeless refugees, fleeing vampires, but still something I didn't know about until today.
Look at the size of that fort. They must have room for a few more in there.
Eastmarch. I wanted to end with Eastmarch again because it's when we finally see the consequences of war. But first, a few other things that we need to talk about, like our hunt for the butcher who killed 4 people before you eventually get to him. Finally, someone else doing the dirty work for a change. Norelian the alchemist died peacefully in his sleep. Oh, I also killed a flaming racist that no one is gonna miss. Adonato still hasn't had his big breakthrough in the writing game. Same. The Argonians are still being grossly underpaid, while Silda still has no place to sleep even though I grossly overpay her to teach me how to pickpocket. Most of Kyne's Grove still sleeps outside, and Darkwater Crossing got one new worker that doesn't help improve the numbers. But the biggest change of all is in the Palace of Kings. In the last couple holes that we visited, you might have noticed that some of the Jarls are different. That's because all the Jarls that supported the Stormcloak Rebellion had to flee from their homes with their courts and families to take emergency shelter in Windhelm. Meaning thanks to the Civil War, Windhelm now has 12 new homeless people it needs to take care of, bringing Eastmarch's homelessness rate from a 15.7% to a 25.7%. That means Eastmarch now passes Winterhold as having the most amount of homeless people. But if we could just take a second and talk about Brunwolf Freewinter for a moment. Brunwolf becomes Jarl after Ulfric gets his beans baked. Brunwolf is known for sticking up to the Dunmer and the Argonians of Windhelm, which already says a lot about the integrity of his character. But a good deed that probably goes unnoticed is that not only did he open his palace doors to his enemies and granted them safe haven, but he also opened his own doors by letting ex-Jarl Courier and his family stay in his own house, which is something that I did not do with even one of my 9 houses. Which brings me to my final thoughts. In our first time doing this survey, we concluded that Skyrim roughly had a population of 836 NPCs, and 123 of them met our definition of homelessness, resulting in a homelessness population of 14.7%. After we did almost everything there is to do in the game, after discovering new locations, making new friends, and killing a bunch of people, like a bunch of people, Skyrim's new population is about 799 NPCs, with 117 of them meeting our definition of homelessness. That means that after the Dragonborn's influence, whether it be for good or for bad, Skyrim now has a homelessness population of 14.6%. Better, but not really, again. Skyrim's homelessness population didn't change, it just moved to a different part of the country. Like San Francisco. It's insane. But granted, it could have been better, but also could have been a lot worse. I could have given the stewardship to one of my 9 houses to someone who doesn't actually have a home. I could have killed a lot more people and fixed the numbers that way. But again, not the solution. In the conclusion of the first video, I mentioned that a lot of the people who have the real power to do something about homelessness just don't. Well, it turns out that the Dragonborn is one of those people, but Jarl Brunwolf is not. He has less than the Dragonborn, but he still found it within himself to open his gates to 12 people that would have raised the sword against him if it came to it. But Brunwolf still fed them and gave them shelter in their time of need. It just goes to show that we should all take a page out of Jarl Brunwolf's book and be more accepting of all people, even those who we may not see eye to eye with. Except for pedophiles. Thank you and take care.